This is City Pulse Newsmakers, a weekly look at the issues and the people behind them in Greater Lansing. Brought to you by City Pulse, Lansing's weekly alternative newspaper. And now, here's your host, City Pulse publisher, Burl Schwartz.
Good morning. We live in an era of cyber insecurity, whether it's our institutions or us personally. We're going to talk about how bad it is and what can be done about it today with Dan Lorman. He is the former Chief Security Officer for the state of Michigan and now the Chief Security Officer for Security Mentor, which is a privately held security training and consulting company. Dan, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And with Kevin Shane, who is the CEO and founder of a local internet provider, acd.net. Good to have you back, Kevin.
Thanks. Glad to be
here. I guess we should start with some recent events nationally and locally, and how typical are these events? For example, the Russians hacked the Democratic National headquarters, and within the last year, the Lansing Board of Water and Light was struck by ransomware. Dan, is this these headlines typical of what stuff we don't even hear about every day anymore?
Sadly, it is. I mean, we're hearing more and more about attacks all the time. I think it's ongoing. It's global. It's national. It's also local. And so, yeah, businesses are being hit. We'll probably talk about some of the details, but whether those be ransomware attacks or, defacements of websites or people hacking in and stealing data, sadly, it's happening almost every day.
And explain what it is ransomware. Is that software that ultimately you can only fix by paying a ransom? Is that?
Yeah, so basically it's a form of malware that people can get on their computer. Sometimes they get it by clicking on a link, or getting some type of, people think traditionally like a virus, but it's a little different than that. But basically what it does is it encrypts the data, and then when the data is encrypted, people, the bad guys, if you will, ask for payment in usually Bitcoin, which is a currency that is not easily tracked, and then people, in order to be paid to get your data back, if you will. So in many cases, they're not even actually stealing the data; they're just encrypting the data, maybe on your hard drive, on your computer, or in your company server, or whatever. And then people have to then either make a decision. Do I have backups? Can I restore my own data myself? Or do I pay the ransom and get the data back, unencrypted? And it's often a tough decision for businesses.
Myth or reality, you're safer with Apple than you are with the PC?
I think it's probably somewhat true. I think it's less true than maybe in the past. I think for years, it was always an argument over, is it because Microsoft has not as secure technology, or is it because more people use, the bad guys are going after the more commonly used operating system. There were less Apples out there, so more Windows systems, plenty of vulnerabilities. Apple's more widespread now, more iPhones, more different techniques to attack it. I still think Apple can be vulnerable. They have had instances of breaches. But overall, I use a lot of Apple devices. I think they're maybe a little bit more secure, but not immune from cyber attacks.
Okay. Kevin, BWL, MSU, what happened there, and what do we do about this?
Well, the biggest thing that needs to happen is hackers are going to get in. It's just like somebody breaking into your house. It happens all the time. The key question is, how long do you let them, sit there through the door? And so a lot of the tracking and logging systems will report when somebody has broken in. Whether or not people are paying attention to those and whether or not they're centralizing that logging in order to take a look at all of the things that might be starting to go wrong. Our experience is, it's not a matter of whether somebody gets hacked. Almost all organizations of any substantial size have had malware on them, or had inappropriate software that's starting to relay information outside of it. But is it there for a day, a week, or months? Most of these systems are running in an automated fashion. People are sending out malware or people are clicking on them on downloads that come through from email links and those types of things. But is it something that you're on top of security, or is it something that somebody has weeks and weeks and months to actually find something that's really valuable to take? So it's really situations where people get severely hacked. It's usually because somebody's been in their network monkeying around for weeks or months at a time.
So BWL, for example.
Yep.
Are they just not doing things they should be doing, or is this just impossible these days?
No, I think they're doing things they need to be doing now, because they've really kind of
kind of like the ice storm.
Yeah, they figured out this is a major problem. And I can tell you in those situations, what hackers are often after, besides ransomware, they're looking at large quantities of data sets. Social security numbers, names, addresses. Same thing with MSU. They believe they took the entire student database for the last. I got a letter in the mail from MSU that said, "You're now under. We've got a security protection program for you. Your information was likely taken." I haven't gone to MSU for 20
right.
plus years, and I'm like, so they got the whole data set, right? Now, obviously we're seeing chips go on credit cards, and all of this is really, why they like to go after educational institutions a lot of times is because they can get virgin data from students,
There are
18-year-olds.
virgins left at college.
Well, from a credit card standpoint, there is. Yeah, like maybe you haven't applied for a credit card, but if you're 17 or 18, a year or 2 or 3 goes by, and you find out that your Social Security number has been utilized to obtain credit services, right? And so that's why getting the young people's data is very valuable, because older people, they may have credit monitoring. They're going to find out pretty quickly that somebody's using their credit, right? So there's really two angles to this: financial fraud of some sort by obtaining essential data from data sources, and then the other part of the equation is that we see oftentimes is this ransomware type thing. A quick $50,000 or $25,000. I don't know what the board paid them. I think it was public record, but it's a matter of now if you do your backups really well,
mm-hmm.
and you've got backups from the previous day, you just laugh at them, wipe out the whole system, restore the backup, and you're done.
Let's bring it down to the individual level. We talk a little bit about credit cards. I know what a chill I get up my spine when my bank calls me and said, "You better stop using that card. We'll send you a new one." What can I do to protect myself better, Dan?
Sure. So I would start by saying that most Americans don't use what we call two-factor authentication. So at a basic level, we think of usernames and passwords. We log into accounts, and people reuse passwords. So things you probably may have heard before, but some of the basics. Don't reuse passwords. Change your passwords frequently. And then best of all, use what we call two-factor authentication. So so what that really means is whether you're Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or even using different Apple products, most of us have smartphones. Like I have a smartphone here. Rather than just using a password, you also will get a text, and you'll type in. They'll send you a text, 4-digit PIN or a 5-digit
mm-hmm.
PIN. You'll type in that you'll use for that one time to access the account. Now, many people think, well, that's a nuisance. I don't want to worry about that. But in many cases, you only have to do it the first time. So you can click a little box that says, remember me on my laptop, right. Remember me. And then from then on, you just have to use the username and password, unless you go to a different PC, unless you go to a different computer, and then you maybe then you get a text.
Yeah.
The advantages of that are if somebody does get your password, whether it be in Europe or Russia or somewhere else, somehow a database is hacked. We talked about Big Yahoo hacked, or they get those email addresses, they get your passwords. It's not going to do them any good if you've got two-factor authentication, or some people call it two-step authentication. Mm-hmm. So that's one simple step.
And it's interesting because just the other day I was changing my password with PNC, and up popped this thing that told me about two-step authentication, which even though I've heard of it, I wouldn't have thought to do it, but they told me how to do it. But I don't see that a lot. I don't see, when I go to sign up for a new password, I don't see something popping up. These companies could do more, couldn't they, to promote
Sure,
that?
they could, and I think there are efforts to do that. I mean, I do know that most banks now offer that, so ask for it at your banks, especially if I'm banking doing monetary transactions. I really want to use the two-factor.
Okay.
Also, I would tell people that it's still like less than 10% of Americans use it, and it's free with Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and these different services. They offer it with the social media sites and these sites, and many people don't take advantage of it. So I would start there, and I would ask. Honestly, I do online banking. People ask me that all the time. Am I worried about online banking? But I make sure I use two-factor authentication with all of my banks and credit unions.
And changing the password is an obvious one, but figuring out, I tried to use this thing called onepassword.com.
Yep.
I couldn't figure it out. Okay. I mean, there has to be a simpler way to just have a more secure password. I keep this password book, and I'm afraid if I lose that password book, I'm in big trouble.
Yeah, and I would say many people don't realize that, like I use Comcast cable, but there's a variety of others. I know there's a lot of different great services out there, and a lot of them give you free, like Norton or Symantec or McAfee antivirus. Running that on your computer is a huge tip.
Okay.
Making sure that you have regularly updated patches, regularly updated antivirus, and then many of them have what we call password vault, or one password, where you can keep their passwords and that's protected. Make sure, like with mine, I use two-factor on that as well. But this is a free service that I get with my Comcast cable. Now, I'm not promoting them, but other cable companies offer different free services that people often don't take advantage of.
Right.
And then lastly, another thing I would mention to you is when people do get a breach, you get that letter from somebody, some organization, Michigan State or anyone else, says we've had a breach, we're offering you free credit protection. Take advantage of that. Many people don't sign up, and they think, well, it's just going to automatically happen or something, but in many cases they don't call the 800 number, they don't actually sign up for the service, and so they never get that advantage. And having that kind of opportunity can actually be a good thing.
And getting back to passwords just for a second,
Sure.
It's also, people will have a password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
I mean, how complicated should a password be? And then how do you keep track of it?
Sure. So I would start with that. Yeah, definitely do not use. I mean, you can Google, the top 20 passwords out there. That's one of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Certainly, I would recommend at least some level of complexity. Usually, most people require, maybe 8 characters, a mixture of upper and lower case, maybe a mixture of letters and symbols and maybe even some special characters like an @ symbol or something like that.
But that's where something like one password or those Vault come in, where
they can help, but once you have those passwords, not reusing them, and then the Vault will actually store those different ones for the different websites.
Right.
So you can just click on my credit union, and then it automatically knows where it goes, like what the URL is on the web, and then it goes in, it knows my username, it knows my password, and it logs it in for me, which is a nice service, having a kind of one place where you keep, the URL, the address, the username, the password, and then also, you protect that place.
All right, let's talk about ACD.net again, company you're CEO of. I notice periodically, new security levels, that sort of thing. How much are you doing in that area?
Oh, a whole lot. I mean, oftentimes, the biggest thing is service providers often see these types of hacks occurring. And so, sometimes when we notify customers, there isn't an immediate, reaction to it, or it's not necessarily believed. But if we see security flaws or issues and we call you up and tell you, hey, you gotta, there's something wrong here. We don't know exactly what it is because we're not in your systems, but you guys have to lock stuff down and quickly. Oftentimes we've seen organizations, we're we're not sure it's a problem. We're like, listen, if we're calling you, there's a problem, right? And we see this particularly with, mid-sized and small businesses. And so the biggest thing that we think needs to happen is paying attention to the logs that are on your PCs, even if you're a residential user, and definitely if you're a small business user.
What does that mean?
Well, a large amount of the security activities, like if somebody's remotely logging into your computer, that'll almost always be put into the log of Windows 10, right? And so just occasionally reviewing that logging information is critical.
Where do I find that log?
Oh, it's in the Security Task Manager, and you can go to I could probably reference a link to you that would describe how to look at the logs on there.
Okay.
Some of the default logging is not necessarily turned on because there's overhead associated with that. The other thing that I would say is the other biggest thing that needs to happen is people really need to be aware of what software is loaded onto their computer, right? So a lot of these, a lot of the malware that's on there is sitting on your computer, and some of them are often registered as, they're kind of light malware, but they'll do little pop-ups on your screen or start running tasks in the background. It's best just to clean off. If you don't know what the software is, remove it, right? And the other thing that we think's pretty important, very, very important, is the vast majority of significant hacks are going to come from phishing attacks from email, right? So, for example, hey, we're Amazon.com. Click here to verify your account.
Right.
Very common where we see, people will click on that, but it may say Amazon.com and have their logo, but the URL has nothing to do with Amazon.
Right, and I usually take the time to report that to Amazon.
Right. Yep, and that those email blasts go out. You'll see it from banks, and that's how they're scraping and gathering data on people and stealing accounts. Is people are typing in their username and password, thinking they're logging into a bank, but they're really not. So very important to pay attention to the URL that you're clicking on. And in no financial institution is going to ask you to log on, right? They're not going to put in their email, please log in the next 3 days to verify your account or verify this information. So anybody asking you to log on to a system likely is a phishing attack. Right?
Myth or reality, it's dangerous to open an attachment from someone you don't know on your computer, but it's okay on your phone.
Well, it's probably a little more secure on your phone, but in general, I wouldn't open attachments from somebody you don't know who they are. If it's not something you were expecting to get, and it doesn't seem to be somebody then don't open it.
The Internet of Things, IoT, a term I'd never heard of until you spoke to Rotary last week. What is it, and how does it affect us?
Yeah, so the Internet of Things really is a concept of almost everything is connected now. So from our cars to our homes, to our different devices around our house. People are talking about smart devices, so smart kitchens, smart ovens. Literally you
smart because it's connected to the internet.
Smart because it's connected to the internet.
So I can turn on my oven from somewhere else, but I can turn on the CIA at the same time.
Well, that's the fear. That gets to the dark side of it. But I think the convenience of the IoT is huge. I mean, more and more people are saying almost everything will have an IP address. What that means is everything's going to be connected to the internet. People have seen commercials of like home security systems where you can lock your doors, and you can see maybe cameras in your house, and you can see it's great. It's a good service. So you're going on vacation, and you can see, is everything safe and secure at the house. Cars are connected. There's a lot of wonderful things you can do with connected cars. Kids like the convenience, those kinds of things. So IoT really, the smart world is almost synonymous with it. Smart cities, smart with almost any other word afterward, and it's going to be, we have smart clothes. Our clothes are going to be literally computers in our clothes, or in our glasses. People remember Google glasses.
Right.
Those would be examples of
on
IoT.
your wrist.
On your wrist. I have a smart watch, Fitbit. So smart watch. Those are all part of what we call IoT. So at a very simple level, it's non-traditional devices that are being connected online. And so there's a lot of benefits to that. My smartwatch counts my steps. It, can monitor my health. It can report back, and I can have this competition with my wife, who's done more steps today. Those kinds of things. The dark side of it is, and that's what we talked about at Rotary, was now these devices in many cases don't have security protections put into them. So people can hack them. There was even a case last year where they were taking over a large number of IoT devices, like home baby monitors and network devices, routers, were not secured and were taken over and were actually used to attack other devices.
Right.
So that we call that a distributed denial of service attack, which is a mouthful, I know, for non-technical people, but a DDoS. You may have heard that term, DDoS. But the idea with a DDoS is I'm going to take over these devices, and whatever, whether they're PCs, whether they're smart devices or IoT devices, and then I'm going to try and bombard or attack some business, some web address, some portal, and if I can bring that portal down, and that was called the Mirai botnet, MIRAI, basically brought down part of the internet that way. So you actually took over these devices to create problems. So again, overall, I think IoT is the future. I mean, I'm not anti-IoT. I'm a security guy, but I think we as security people need to be enabling of what the future is. And just like cloud security was cloud computing was big, and smartphones, you don't say, just don't have a smartphone, you secure the smartphone.
So the other night I was watching John Oliver, and he said, okay, you've got a smart TV, and this is complicated. Get a piece of paper, you got to write this down. Turn it off. But that does bring a philosophical issue up. How much of this stuff do we want? You say it's the future, but I'm going back to vinyl records. I mean, how much of this do we want as our future? Either of you guys.
Well, I think technology is both a something that creates complexity, but also hopefully simplifies things at times, right? Like one of my Internet of Things at my home is my thermostat, right?
Yep.
When I go on vacation a couple of weeks ago, I'm like, I forgot to kill the thermostat and drop the heat, and you can do that from remote. Yeah. But as these interfaces get simpler and more refined, just like the iPhones and the Android phones, people are going to use them. There's no stopping it, right? And ultimately, I think we're on a march forward, right? I mean, I think what's really interesting are these voice-controlled devices, right? Like Amazon Alexa or the Google devices. Those are going to become proliferating across people's homes. But Amazon Alexa, you can tell it, Alexa, turn on my lights in my house if you've got smart light bulbs. But what's odd about it is whenever they hear the word Alexa or something similar to that on the television, that gets over to the microphone of my Amazon Alexa device, and it starts, I didn't understand what you were asking for.
Now, and of course we know that this is the future, but then we also know that 40% of residents of Detroit, for example, don't even have a computer. Yep. So what is the danger there for society? Are we going to leave people behind, or is it going to evolve to the point where everybody will be able to afford a computer, will get that cheap? Where do you see it going, Dan?
I mean, I think you do have, even they say in Africa, everyone's got a smartphone or at least a flip phone, and they're even doing banking transactions with, texting. I do think it is imperative that we make sure that the residents of Detroit and other cities have access, whether that be, via libraries, via schools. That is an important, matter for society, and that we have to, enable that and provide that. And I think there are programs that do that work with young people, that work with families to help them in that area. I think going back to the other question that you brought up earlier, I do think the boat's kind of leaving the dock, and I do think that IoT is here to stay, and it's going to get more and more, kind of like we had Cloud 1.0 and now Cloud 2.0 and 3.0. There's going to be more and more smart devices. It's going to be proliferating. I do think there are things people can do now, though, when they're buying the devices, is do their homework, look at those devices even today in 2017. Are the default passwords in? Change that default password. What can they do to, make sure that the security features of the device, if they exist, are actually turned on? So those are things that people can do their homework, do their research, and make sure the devices they're buying are secure. But as far as the proliferation of it and the benefit, I do think there are times I tell our kids, turn it off. But I mean, we're very fortunate. We do have access to it, and I think we need to make sure all parts of society have access to technology.
Kevin, here in the city of Lansing, we've got 29% of the population lives in poverty, and your job is to sell people the internet. What's the situation here as far as the haves and the have-nots?
Well, I think the huge challenge in the educational market, as well as with lower income folks, is where the technological divide is continuing. I don't think it's becoming less. I mean, smartphones did put a computer into a lot of people's hands, right? And so for many people, lower income people especially, they're relying on the computer they have is the smartphone.
Which is why a lot of people reacted so adversely to someone who said, well, just, you don't need a smartphone when you're poor.
Right.
They need it more than people
more
who are well
than
off.
people who have a desktop PC and they can go to a website because these apps that are on. But smartphones are going to become the lower end smartphones, although they're not quite as big, are almost as powerful as the ones that are out there. So the more expensive ones that are out there, and so younger kids are becoming technologically savvy with the usage of these devices. But increasingly, if we don't invest in technology training at a young age, I think that you're risking leaving a lot of people behind, in my opinion.
All right, very good. We got to wrap it up. Our annual Top of the Town Best of contest is going on right now. If you want to participate in it, you go to LansingCityPulse.com. The contest is open for about 2 more weeks. Thank you both, gentlemen, Dan Lorman and Kevin Shane. It's been a great discussion. I really appreciate it. And we will be back with you next week. Have a great rest of your weekend.